All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Fedora.
Fedora on?
Happy Halloween.
It's backwards. Your fedora's on backwards. There we go.
No, it's on correctly.
It's better, Mr. Mraz.
It's going even worse than Sinatra, but whatever. All right. So this is episode what?
Ooh, that's a good question. I actually don't know.
I would say 11 or 12.
Okay, we'll go with 11.
I would say 10 to 12 is my guess.
Okay, we'll do 10 to 12. Possibly 13.
And
it's Halloween.
It's Halloween, and we're going to be doing a Halloween-themed episode.
You are?
I am. What?
Athanasiosyanos.
Right, I'm Athanasiosyanos.
And I'm Matthew Brown.
And we want to talk about briefly mention the name change, or...
Yes, it's in progress. We're
in progress. The name change is in progress.
You've put forward a proposition.
I put forward a proposition of from the soul, but out of the ass.
Right.
Or arse, as he would say.
This is my contention, right?
Right.
I feel like, because we're going to have to pick one of those for the name, and I'm not going to say ass, and you're not going to say arse. So
no.
We should probably land on something.
But, people, you know where to leave comments. We've said it a million times.
Voice comments as well.
Voice comments, yeah. Voice comments as well. So, let us know what you think of the name. And if you want to change it. All right, so I don't think we should wait too much.
Oh, let's get into it.
All this time. We're going to be reading first the Edgar Allen Poe short story, Telltale Heart. And then we will be talking about fear. Have a conversation about fear.
Very topical.
Yeah. So, we're just going to take turns reading the story. Again, if you're listening on Spotify, you should be able to find a video on YouTube. If you're listening to it on YouTube, you should be able to find just the audio on Spotify or Apple Music, whatever you get your podcasts. All right, so let's get into it. Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. It's true. Yes, I've been ill. Very ill. But why do you say that? I've lost control of my mind. Why do you say that I am mad? Can you not see that I have full control of my mind? Is it not clear that I am not mad? Indeed, the illness only made my mind, my feelings, my senses stronger, more powerful. My sense of hearing especially became more powerful. I could hear sounds I had never heard before. I heard sounds from heaven, and I heard sounds from hell. Listen! Listen, and I will tell you how it happened. You will hear how healthy my mind is. It is impossible to say how the idea first entered my head. There was no reason for what I did. I did not hate the old man. I even loved him. He had never hurt me. I did not want his money. I think it was his eye. His eye was like the eye of a vulture, the eye of one of those terrible birds that watch and wait while an animal dies, and then fall upon the dead body and pull it into pieces to eat it. When the old man looked at me with his vulture eye, a cold feeling went up and down my back. Even my blood became cold.
And so, I finally decided I had to kill the old man and close that eye forever. So you think that I am mad? A madman cannot plan, but you should have seen me. During all of that week, I was as friendly to the old man as I could be, and warm and loving. Every night, about 12 o'clock, I slowly opened his door, and when the door was open wide enough, I put my hand in, and my head. In my hand I held a light covered with a cloth, so that no light showed, and I stood there quietly. Then, carefully, I lifted the cloth, just a little, so that a single, thin, small light fell across that eye. For 7 nights I did this, 7 long nights, every night at midnight. Always the eye was closed, so it was impossible for me to do the work. For it was not the old man I felt I had to kill, it was the eye, his evil eye. And every morning I went to his room, and with a warm, friendly voice I asked him how he had slept. He could not guess that every night, just at 12, I looked in at him as he slept. The 8th night I was more than usually careful as I opened the door. The hands of a clock moved more quickly than my hand did. Never before had I felt so strongly my own power. I was now sure of success. The old man was lying there, not dreaming that I was at his door. Suddenly he moved in his bed. You may think I became afraid, but no. The darkness in his room was thick and black. I knew he could not see the opening of the door. I continued to push the door, slowly, softly. I put in my head. I put in my hand with the covered light. Suddenly the old man sat up straight in bed and cried, "Who's there?" I stood quite still. For a whole hour I did not move. Nor did I hear him again lie down in his bed. He just sat there, listening. Then I heard a sound, a low cry of fear which escaped from the old man. Now I knew that he was sitting up in his bed, filled with fear. I knew that he knew I was there. He did not see me there. He could not hear me there. He felt me there. He knew that death was standing there.
Slowly, little by little, I lifted the cloth until a small light escaped from under it to fall upon that vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and my anger increased as it looked straight at me. I could not see the old man's face, only that eye. That hard blue eye, and the blood in my body became like ice. Have I not told you that my hearing had become unusually strong? Now I could hear a quick, low, soft sound, like the sound of a clock heard through a wall. It was the beating of the old man's heart. I tried to stand quietly, but the sound grew louder. The old man's fear must have been great indeed, and the sound grew louder. My anger became greater and more painful. But it was more than anger. In the quiet night, in the dark silence of the bedroom, my anger became fear, for the heart was beating so loudly that I was sure someone must hear. "The time has come!" I rushed into the room, crying, "Die! Die!" The old man gave a loud cry of fear as I fell upon him and held the bed covers tightly over his head. Still his heart was beating, but I smiled as I felt that success was near. For many minutes that heart continued to beat, but at last the beating stopped. The old man was dead. I took away the bed covers and held my ear over his heart. There was no sound. Yes, he was dead. Dead as a stone, his eye would trouble me no more. So I am mad, you say? You should have seen how careful I was to put the body where no one could find it. First, I cut off the head, then the arms and the legs. I was careful not to let a single drop of blood fall on the floor. I pulled up 3 boards that formed the floor. 3 of the boards that formed the floor, and put the pieces of the body there. Then I put the boards down again, carefully, so carefully that no human eye could see that they had moved. As I finished this work, I heard that someone was at the door. It was now 4 o'clock in the morning, but still dark. I had no fear. However, as I went down to open the door, 3 men were at the door, 3 officers of the police. One of the neighbors had heard the old man's cry and had called the police. These 3 had come to ask questions and to search the house.
I asked the police to come in. The cry, I said, was my own, in a dream. The old man, I said, was away. He had gone to visit a friend in the country. I took them through the whole house, telling them to search it all, to search well. I led them finally into the old man's bedroom. As if playing a game with them, I asked them to sit down and talk for a while. My easy, quiet manner made the policemen believe my story, so they sat talking with me in a friendly way. But although I answered them in the same way, I soon wished that they would go. My head hurt, and there was a strange sound in my ears. I talked more and faster. The sound became clearer, and still they sat and talked. Suddenly, I knew that the sound was not in my ears. It was not just inside my head. At that moment, I must have become quite white. I talked still faster and louder, and the sound too became louder. It was a quick, low, soft sound, like the sound of a clock heard through a wall, a sound I knew well. Louder it became, and louder. Why did the men not go? Louder, louder. I stood up and walked quickly around the room. I pushed my chair across the floor to make more noise to cover that terrible sound. I talked even louder, and still the men sat and talked and smiled. Was it possible that they could not hear? No, they heard. I was certain of it. They knew. Now it was they who were playing a game with me. I was suffering more than I could bear from their smiles and from that sound. Louder, louder, louder. Suddenly I could bear it no longer. I pointed at the boards and cried, "Yes, yes, I killed him. Pull up the boards and you shall see. I killed him. But why does his heart not stop beating? Why does it not stop?"
That was some good reading.
Thank you. Likewise.
So I think we should clarify, just, I don't know, maybe you got this, right? That the story is this man who is tormented by this old man's eye, kills him, derives a perfect plan to do it, to cover up the murder, and then he imagines the heart of the dead old man beating so loud that it drives him crazy.
Right.
And to the point where he has to admit the murder and give it up.
Sure.
Now, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm a little confused, because he starts off by saying how he's not unwell, how he's not ill, right? How, like, you think me mad, right? And he's very confident in his ability to hear, you know, his cunning, his power he talks about. And then it seems to me like the man at the beginning of the story is talking from just before the police came.
Right.
Right? Right, there's that kind of gap between the murder and the police turning up because the neighbors overheard the cry, and that seems to be the person telling the story.
Right.
And then we seem to rejoin him right at the end when the police came, because he disintegrates, right? Like, he's like that confidence, that not bravado, but, you know, his certainty in what he's done, right, just disappears, and like he's like hearing things that aren't there. It's the beating of the heart of the man that he checked just a moment ago that wasn't beating, and it's reappeared. It's not, and he said, although he says it's not in my mind, he thinks it's genuinely the beating heart of the man. Right. So it's like those are the kind of like it's like, well, that's why we think you're mad, mate. Right. But like I said, I think the guy at the beginning it's just before the police turn up. That's when he's at his most confident, or just after the murder. But it doesn't make that explicit, so I think
I can hear sounds I've never heard before. Seems like he's starting to hear something of the... Well, either it's he's starting to hear something of the old man's heart, and it magnifies towards the end, or he's boasting about his senses and his clear thinking, and only to have that dramatic disruption at the end. Now, to me, it kind of seems like the latter, right? Is the juxtaposition between, at the beginning, somebody who seems like they're totally, or at least affirming that they're totally in touch with everything and sane and perfectly normal, and then you see him turn into somebody that's mad because of the killing.
Right. Well, I mean, and because the focus is not on the old man, right? It's like the old man's eye. Right. So again, like these are other more things that's like, well, those aren't the conclusions that a normal person would reach, right? And here's this man that I was fond of, I lived with, apparently, who was kind to me, I was kind to him, yet it was his eye, right? Like his vulture, evil eye. Right. He was like being tormented by it, and I don't know, maybe that's like the eye that saw him for who he truly was and tormented him. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, I think.
Or sorry, do you think my original comment was wrong, and this is still the man at the end of the story, after he's been caught and confessed, but he's still convinced of his sanity, even after he's...
Oh, actually, I think it's that.
Right.
I think even he's still convinced in the beginning. This is after
the whole story.
Right, and he's still convinced that he was really hearing
Because he's saying
This is like probably him in either in court
prison.
or in jail or in prison.
being interviewed, perhaps.
Right. And he's, saying, look, there's nothing wrong with me. Which is ironic. And obviously the story is about, the guilt that comes with.
Right. Well, what do they say about, like, mad people don't define themselves as mad. Like, they wouldn't describe themselves as mad. So it's like their actions are perfectly normal to themselves.
I think it's also just, like I said, doing something like this turns you into somebody. You can't do something like this and remain sane, right? The corrupting.
Right, but the dude was stood in someone's bedroom for 7 nights a week before killing someone.
Well,
That's pretty weird.
Master act to murder somebody. I mean,
do you reckon? Oh, hang on, because that's quite a common trope in kind of horror movies. Not that I watch many of them. But you know of the person stood in someone's room. There's like a recording of someone sleeping or whatever, and someone turns up and they're stood over their bed in the dark for hours and hours and hours.
I mean, it's the line, keep your friends close, enemies closer, right? So it's the idea of, he says, every morning I went to his room with a warm, friendly smile, warm, friendly voice. I asked how he slept. He could not guess that every night, just at 12, I looked in at him, and as he slept, so it's giving the impression that he's like, loves this guy, and, is very fond of him, and, old man would have no suspicion that he would be
standing in his room every night, plotting to kill him.
Yeah.
Right.
But it is interesting. It does seem like, it does seem like there's something to horror movies where there's always like a pretext of somebody just creeping, in, and I think most of it's probably for effect, to
build suspense kind of thing.
Right, to give the audience a little amuse-bouche.
Maybe. Well, okay, but what about, let's talk about the 8th night. The night where he kills him, where the old man, because is he stood in his room while the old man is, because he opens the door, puts his head in, then his hand.
Right. And so the 8th night, I was more than usually careful as I opened the door. The hands of a clock moved more quickly than did my hand. Never before had I felt so strongly my own power. I was now sure of success. So yes, he kills him on the 8th day. Right.
Where is that, sorry?
That's on the 2nd page. Right.
Right at the
down
bottom.
Here.
Okay. I'll just read this again. So the old man was lying there. Oh no, so the 8th night I was more than usually careful as I opened the door. The hands of a clock moved more quickly than my hand did, so he still put his hand in. Never before had I felt so strongly of my own power. I was now sure of success. The old man was lying there, not dreaming that I was at his door. So he was lying there with his eyes closed, but not dreaming. Suddenly he moved in his bed. You may think I became afraid, but no. The darkness in his room was thick and black. I knew he could not see the opening of the door. I continued to push the door softly, slowly. I put in my head. I put in my hand with the covered light. Suddenly the old man sat up in bed and cried, "Who's there?" So
and then he says, I stood quite still. For a whole hour I did not move. Nor did I hear him lie down in his bed. He just sat there listening.
Okay, so I think this is, so Edgar Allen Poe, I'm assuming, was writing in the 1800s?
Yes. Late 1800s, early 1900s.
Okay, cool. So houses were going to be a little different, right? Like, so in the middle of the night, there wouldn't be these kind of ambient lights that we have in our homes, right? So in the middle of a night, right, it would be pitch black.
Presumably you just use a candle too.
Right, but he's got it covered, right? So there's no light coming out. So from the perspective of the old man, it's pitch black. So even if he stood in the doorway, assuming there's no moonlight or anything to illuminate the hallway, it would seem as if whether the door was ajar and someone was stood there, if it was pitch black, you wouldn't be able to tell one way or the other. So maybe that's why it sounds weird.
Right. It still is
Yeah, it's still a pretty weird thing to do.
He stands there for an hour?
Well, I guess no, but that's that confidence again, right? That's like, because he, like, I don't know, embodies like a predator, right? Like a predatory cat, right? Who's stalking an animal, and it notices that he's there, and the cat just freezes.
And then he says, I knew that he knew that I was there. He did not see me. He could not hear me there. He felt me there. He knew that death was standing there.
Hmm.
I mean, that's...
So, and yet he did nothing, right? And what is he laying in bed? Well, because I guess, because maybe, right, from the old man's perspective, he was coming to realize that the only person that it could be is the person who's been being really chummy to him for the last
Right.
7 days. And so maybe he's realizing there's no point to cry out, because the person who is here to do me harm is the person who has sold himself as my friend.
Or maybe from the murderer's perspective. The old man is accepting death, and that's part of his justification for not, like, initially not caring, because he says he knew death was standing there.
I don't think it's from like a not caring. I think it's like from like a petrified, right? As in like frozen with fear, right? As in like realizing the, like, because I like he said, because it's dark, he can't see, but it's like a sense, right? It's like I sense someone's in the room with me, and the only person it could be is the person who I share a house with, and like, why is he just stood in the doorway, right?
Right.
Being super still when he's been chummy with me. So if I yell out, it'll just, I don't know, speed up the process of death, because he'll like attack me. So if I sit here in silence, because it's like, that's a tactic for scared animals, right? Because you have a couple of options. You have like fight, flight, or some other thing that I've forgotten. Freeze, that's it. Fight, flight, or freeze, right? And like, so you run away, you fight, or you sit there and you wait. Maybe the thing goes away.
Right.
Right? And maybe that was the path he chose, was freeze. And then maybe the crazy guy will leave.
Well, but it's also, like you said, it was presumably pitch black, right? So he may sense it, he may think it, but probably a part of him wants to deny.
Right, okay,
it
maybe,
exists.
right. Like he's like, you wake up and after a dream or something, and you're sat there in bed, like holding a blanket in the old cliche.
Right.
It's like,
Right.
right, just listening and waiting, because you're like, well, I can't be right about this, because why would there be like a demon in my room or something?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Have you ever had sleep paralysis?
Sleep what?
Paralysis. Is it sleep paralysis?
What is sleep paralysis?
Or where you are in the state between being awake and asleep, and it doesn't happen all, like, it happens like to a few people. It's quite common. So it's
everything to do with sleep has happened to me.
Okay, apart from this. So no, but this is like, so this is.
Oh, it's when you realize you're in the dream.
No, that's lucid dreaming.
Okay.
So this is like, I used to get this quite a lot in my early 20s. It was like you're either dozing or just coming out of sleep or just going into it, and you're in this kind of semi-dream state, but in your own space, in your own room or wherever you are, and it is as if like someone is immediately behind you, right, or sat on you, right, and you feel the
I've heard about
presence of something, and you try to move, right. You try to, like, because you want to look, right? Your immediate instinct is to, like, turn around and see what it is. But and I think this, like, because when you go to sleep, your brain shuts off a part of your motor functions, so that while you're dreaming, you don't do loads of crazy stuff. And so you can't jerk or shift, because that part of your brain's kind of switched off. And then you kind of have to, like, wriggle yourself out of this state to, like, flip around and then realize no one's there. Hey, bud, have you booked the room?
Yeah.
You have? Okay.
Okay. That was a short conversation. That was a short, good...
You.
What?
That's right.
Short, good, brief conversation.
We have to vacate the room.
We have to vacate the room because there's some room Nazis. That was a joke. I probably shouldn't have made that joke.
These are nice Nazis. Happy Halloween, everybody!
You can't say that.
Okay, we've been on.
We've been asked to leave, so we will leave, and we're going to pick it up in a different room with the conversation on fear.
Awesome.
All right. All right. So we are back, picking up the conversation with fear. I just want to say, technical stuff, we're still figuring it out. Promise, in the future.
My voice won't be so gainy when I read things loudly.
And we will get better with the video and the blah 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 blah. I promise. We're
This is high-tech stuff, people.
We're
YouTube.
Yeah. we're still in the very low budget.
The lowest of budgets.
Lowest of budgets. But we're trying.
That we are. Anyway, enough
of the
formalities and
formalities. All right.
Lack of finances.
So I have something written. I wrote this last winter. I don't totally remember writing it. And I had a brief look at it last night. And I made a couple notes. So I will obviously put it up on whatever platform we use to put it up. Presumably Spotify and YouTube and all the other ones. So you can see what we're looking at too. But I'm just gonna read it, and as I read it, I'm gonna walk Matthew and you guys through it, because it's not everything is self-explanatory.
Go for it.
So this is
we'll talk about it as you go.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So here's the main. This is the rest of the thing is bullet points. This beginning part is a paragraph form. So, our biggest fears are the ones that we subconsciously will to be true, because we are aware of having that fear or that thing creep into our lives when we are not expecting it. So we make it a reality, thinking that at least we're aware of it. And this in turn leads us being unable to take steps to move past these fears. Fear is in some way synonymous with failure, but failure in a quantified manner, because on the one hand, there is the failure that stems from never having really tried to succeed, or not taking risks that can lead up to succeeding. These failures are embraced by us relative to the thing that we fear most. And on the other hand, there is the failure that results from coming up short, even after having tried all the steps you can take to succeed, i.e. it involves trying and failing. This second fear related to trying and failing is what I believe is in reality our biggest fears, and we want to take all steps to avoid it because it means in our eyes being defeated, and this is worse to many of us than defeating ourselves. So let me unpack that a little bit,
please,
because I think it's worth doing so.
Go for it.
So the first sentence, our biggest fears are the ones that we subconsciously will to be true. Because, I wrote two becauses, but there should be one. Because we are afraid of having that fear or that thing creep into our lives when we are not expecting it. So we make it a reality, thinking that at least we are aware of it. And this in turn leads us to being unable to take steps to move past these fears. So the idea here is what we're really afraid of is the thing, like, this is more related to the idea of fears of taking action, like, stuff like drowning or not being able to, like, fear of, heights or whatever. And the idea is we embrace that fear to be true because we don't want to unexpectedly, in other words, we don't want to not be thinking of that fear and ignore that fear and then have it come into our lives as a shock unexpectedly. We want to be completely aware of that thing, that we turn it into a reality.
Okay, so kind of like a self-sabotaging, self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing.
Exactly, but the self-sabotaging is to prevent this, the fear of ignorance, in the sense that if you don't think you have any fears, or there's nothing that fear, and then it unexpectedly hits you, right? So the thing that you're afraid of, or presumably when you're afraid of something, you're afraid of the consequence that comes along with that thing, right?
Okay.
You're not afraid of, tigers just because they're tigers. You're afraid of tigers because there's a consequence associated with you coming into contact with tigers that scares you.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure. I mean, I'm struggling to see how it fits with drowning as a
I'll get into it.
Just because because it feels like things like drowning and even like tigers or being scared of heights, that those, I know some people aren't afraid of those things, but they seem more like existential threats rather than things that you're kind of willing yourself to be aware of and afraid of for the purposes of alleviating yourself of that fear all the time. They kind of seem to be, like you said, I don't walk down the street going, God, I hope I don't drown today.
Right.
I'm terrified. I don't want to drown. That would be awful. Like, imagine the smothering sensation and finally realizing I have to take a breath and like I'm underwater. Like, that's terrifying. You don't think about that until you're in a swimming pool or you're out to sea.
But here's, I'll get into this later.
Yeah.
But if you're really terrified of drowning, that really is a fear that haunts you.
Right.
And we're talking about biggest fears. We're not just talking about
just general. Okay.
Like,
right.
when you won't even get in the pool.
Right. You'll stay away from the sea.
You'll stay away from the pool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so you'll never. It will. That. I think it's okay.
Oh, and so the not going to the experience of the pool or the sea is the self-sabotage.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
We'll get into. I think it's worth moving down because
sure.
The beginning was.
This is your piece, so you.
It's not really my. It's like a 10-minute scribble.
No, go for it.
But I think about these ideas of fear a lot. So the first point is, it seems that fear is based off of a perceived deficiency or flaws that we have with ourselves. So drowning is the inability to swim. Social anxiety is belief that you're not good enough. Tigers, right, is the idea that you're not going to be able to, fight a tiger, right. Which maybe is legitimate.
I think most people could fight tigers.
So let's. I don't know. What do you think of this? Because to me, right, like, I think we should. Drowning to me is the most explicit. Drowning is the inability to swim or keep yourself at surface.
Right.
Right?
Sure. I mean, but I think it comes back to I think it. I don't know. See, when I think of drowning, for me, it's that being in a position of like holding your breath, right, and knowing you're going to have to take one. Right, like, because you have a couple of options, right? You can just hold your breath till you pass out, and then hope you don't take some in while you're unconscious.
But you're kind of talking about already drowning. I guess the difference is I'm speaking more about the element,
like an irrational fear of drowning when you're on land.
Well, but no, what you're describing is like you've already drowned.
Yeah,
right?
That's the scary part.
Well, I think the fear is the moment where you could drown. It could happen.
Sure.
Right? It's not,
But we're kind of like walking towards like the agoraphobe or agoraphobe, however you say it. You know, where it's like, oh, I could, if I go outside my house today, I could drown in a puddle, or I could knock my head, become unconscious, and land in a puddle and drown.
Right.
I don't want to go outside because then that could happen. And so, like, are we distinguishing between like rational and irrational fears when you're talking about like our biggest fears? Because you could like take that to its extreme, and maybe that's annoying, but
Well, I mean, I'm not totally sure I understand what you mean by
okay.
irrational and rational in this particular instance, because, look, I guess,
So I feel like you're talking about the possibility of drowning,
yes.
right? Not the drowning itself.
Well, because I don't know.
But then I'm asking where you're like drawing the line, because the possibility of drowning and
Because to me, I don't know. In my mind, you might disagree with this, but most people have fear of the, it's fear of entering into situations that have the possibility of drowning because they themselves think they are going to drown. And so that's where the deficiency comes in. They think they are going to drown because they cannot swim.
okay. I think I see that.
You see that?
I think so.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, carry on. We'll see.
So then, a second point. Well, what's the answer to this? Maybe it's to embrace these deficiencies. I recognize that they are part of you, and that you need to embrace it and open your heart to the world, letting it embrace you. Is it difficult? Do you agree with that so far?
I'm not sure what you mean by this last bit. So recognize that they're a part of you, so your fears, that's fine. Makes sense to me. And then you need to embrace it. It's like recognizing that you have a fear of drowning, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't.
No. The deficiencies, not the fear. The deficiencies.
Right, but that lead to the fear, right? Like
Yes.
I'm aware that I have these deficiencies, that if I was in a body of water, I couldn't prevent myself from drowning, which leads to the fear of maybe I'll drown.
Right.
So embracing those deficiencies, right?
Embracing the I can't swim,
Right, yeah.
etc.
But, and the second bit, and open your heart to the world, letting it embrace you. I don't understand that.
Open heart to the world. I think the idea is you have to. Okay, what I was trying to say here is, again, I wrote this
Yeah.
12 months ago.
Sure.
Is you have to be comfortable with people around you, and the world is really meaning the social world, right? Not some higher God that we're talking about. We're talking about everyday people, you, me, Joe, the philosophy teacher,
Yeah, all the people.
Marianne, right?
Yeah.
You have to let yourself feel comfortable with them understanding that you have this flaw.
Right.
That's what I was trying to say here.
Okay. And this is kind of like in the aim of improving the flourishing of a person so that they flesh out those deficiencies and like
Right. So the okay. Let's reframe this in a different way. What's the problem here? The problem that I think that I'm trying that I think is an issue, right? That I guess I'm trying to think about in this is, it seems like when we have a huge fear, it seems like a lot of times it turns out that fear, we allow it to actualize.
Okay, see, I don't think I follow you here, because so you're saying that we bring about the things that we're most afraid of, and
We let them persist.
right by not dealing with them.
by being afraid. No, we
No, but there's loads of things that we're afraid of.
right.
But are you talking specifically about the thing you're most afraid of, or fear, or things that we fear generally? Because like there's loads of things that you could say that.
I think. Look, I think this biggest fear idea I want to kind of move away from.
Okay.
Because I think this is a conversation for another time, but to me, you want to talk about the biggest fear, you can tie it all into one deficiency. What is that deficiency? An ability to be immortal.
Okay. It's a fear of death.
Fear of death.
Okay.
But I think that's conversation for. I want to focus on that's kind of more micro, expanded ideas, meta fear. For now, I want to focus on just concrete things like, death is a concrete thing, but it's the most concrete thing. But stuff like drowning, fear of heights, fear of planes, spiders, lions, tigers, and bears.
Oh my.
That kind of fear. Okay. Right? Or a fear of, social anxiety, right? Fear of, speaking, or fear of talking, or
Okay. So like general run-of-the-mill things people are fairly commonly afraid of.
Right.
Okay. And you're saying that they, in harboring those fears as a result of deficiencies that they're aware of, they bring about those things happening.
Because here's what happens. And again, I'm not a psychologist.
No, we're just
shooting the shit.
Out. Yeah.
Is we perceive that we have these deficiencies and that they're internal to us.
Okay.
But at the same time, because we perceive that they're internal to us, and because we're so afraid of being in a scenario where our deficiencies come to light, where we're not, where we're unable, like when it shocks us, when it surprises us, when we're not aware of, we want to be aware that we have these deficiencies. And so to prevent any, and in some cases it's logical, right? Like if you don't know how to swim, right? Then you're not going to go into the ocean.
Right. You wouldn't put yourself into situations where that fear might manifest itself as a reality.
But there's an extent where you take it to a whole nother level, which is, I'm never even going near water because I don't have this capacity, and I don't want to be in a scenario where I find out that I actually can't swim. Or I don't want to be in a scenario where I actually find out that, I...
But they already know they can't swim. They already know they can't swim, and they already know they're socially awkward. That's why they don't want to go and be near the thing in the first place.
But what I'm saying is, it's this like continuous loop, because you fear this thing, right? It turns into a deficiency,
right?
And then you let it persist and continue because.
Okay, so I'm confused. I thought the fear came from the deficiency.
It does,
right? You said it was caused by it. Or am I getting confused here? See, because I think I'm struggling because I think the things we're afraid of aren't actually the things that we think we're afraid of, right? Like when you're socially anxious, you're in a room and you're just very conscious and aware of the fact that you're in a room full of people and you think you're being watched by all the people that are in there, and you're having every single one of your little movements observed and judged just in people's heads, and you're usually wrong about that, right? Like, you're usually like as someone who, like, I am a socially anxious person generally. I was as a kid, like, tremendously. And it's like, when you go out clubbing or you go out for a party or whatever, you just stood there very conscious of the fact that you have hands, and you're like, I don't know what to do with them. What do I do with, like, where do I put my hands? And are my hands at a socially acceptable place? And are people watching me and observing that I've got my hands in the wrong place in the social scenario? And this whole conversation's going on in your head, and it's completely pointless, right? Because no one's doing any of that. Everyone's enjoying themselves and not paying attention to what your hands are doing. Right. So, like, this fear, this awareness, you know, and even like drowning or say heights, right? You're like, oh, I don't want to go near it because I'll get all hot and sweaty, my heart will race, and maybe I'll just tumble clumsily over the edge of a precipice. Right. But when you actually, I guess, as you would say, press those deficiencies, you actually put yourself in that scenario, and you, I guess, like in the socially anxious situation, you learn to just, I guess, to gradually stop paying attention to the fact that you have hands, right? And you actually learn to engage in the social environment that you're in. You realize that no one's paying attention to you as much as you're paying attention to anyone else's hands, right? And so this fear that you had in your head doesn't materialize in reality as much as it was in your head. So when you confront it, you expose yourself to the thing that you were afraid of. You realize, oh no, I'm actually way more capable of being in this scenario that because the socially anxious one, you just don't go to the party, right? You just stay away from the party.
But that's what I mean.
Yeah. So I'm okay.
I mean, you never, because, like you said, because you don't go to the party. Because why? Because you don't want to be in that, like, scenario where you've convinced yourself, you think that you don't have this, like, deficiency, or you think you can get better, and then having it, like,
right. And then, but by doing it, you demonstrate to yourself that you can, and that's how you kind of resolve these deficiencies.
But most people don't.
Right.
And so they continue this cycle of fear because they don't, like you said, they don't confront it.
Well, yeah, fair enough. I'd agree with that.
And then so they just, instead of confronting it, they stay away, right? And then so,
as like an expedient short-term solution to the problem, rather than the difficult, harder path of getting in a swimming pool, standing by a cliff, and go to a house party.
Right, because as you said, right, like, if you have social anxiety, in the moment, what's easier? Going to the party and being so fucking
uncomfortable,
uncomfortable, or just staying at home and being like,
right.
And then because you're not going to the party and going to, or putting yourself in other more uncomfortable situations,
you don't grow.
Right. That fear stays with you.
Yeah.
And it becomes, that deficiency becomes even greater.
Right. Okay. So it compounds on itself the more you don't confront it and contend with it.
Exactly.
Okay. I think I see now. Sorry for the confusion.
No, we're good. So that's the embrace the deficiencies. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, and we just covered that,
sure.
Right? So then the next part is, this is very difficult. Here's one reason why maybe it could be. Many people along the way will not embrace you, and society is flawed. Do you agree with that?
Many people along the way will not embrace you, and society is flawed. See, no, I'm not sure I do, because I think, again, I think it's down. Most people would be happy for you to do the things that you aren't happy or comfortable doing, right? It isn't like if you walked up to someone, or you were going to a party, and you were like, "Look, I don't really feel comfortable going, right? Can you, like, not leave me on my own, or don't just go off and do some other stuff and whatever." I think every now and again, obviously, you do get people who are just dicks and abandon you, or say, "Oh, do you mind coming down to the pool with me while I try and learn to swim?" And you know, or I feel like when someone says I'm going to try and confront a fear of mine, I don't get the sense that people like mock or ridicule or don't accept that person's journey. I mean, we used to have this. I'm going to count on myself now. When I was a PT years ago, we used to have this concept called crabbing, which was that this was like in terms of weight loss, right? That when you decided you were going to try and put yourself in better shape, you know, eat better, exercise more, and say you were around people like at the office or at home that just generally didn't take care of themselves, like you weren't taking care of yourself. And then when you took that step and you tried to eat better, you know, they'd offer you cake all the time, even though they knew you were on this kind of, they were doing something better. They'd still offer you a bit of cake, or they'd offer you a drink, or they'd offer you a smoke, or, you know, they'd try to give you excuses not to do the things that you were doing. And we would say that the reason why we called it crabbing was because I have never tested this, so maybe this isn't true, but the example was if you got two crabs and you put them in like a deep bucket, right? One of the crabs would try and climb out, right? And the other crab would grab the first crab and pull the crab down and then try and climb out, right? And the other crab would then grab the crab and pull the crab down. So we'd call it crabbing because the people around you would try and pull you down. Is that kind of what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay, right, okay. Fair enough. So okay, fair enough. So I guess I guess like I guess you can have both of those things, right? You're going to have the people who are going to try and pull you down and the people who are going to say, great, like, sort of like...
I probably shouldn't have said many people, but some people.
Okay, fair enough.
Some people.
Okay. Yeah, sure, yeah, no, I know, yeah, fair enough. I don't have a problem with that.
You know, and then so, quite a point, we don't accept people... Again, we, meaning, that sounds universal, but it's not. It's, you know, quantified in the sense that it's some.
Sure.
Some people don't accept people with flaws, even though we ourselves are all plagued with them.
Mm-hmm.
But it is not one's own flaws that causes world, meaning some people, to outcast. I didn't finish the sentence there.
Okay. So a year and a half ago, Athan not completing his sentences.
Not completing my sentences.
Right, okay, but let's take that first part first. So we don't accept people with flaws even though we ourselves are all plagued with them. So that's kind of like coming back to the like self-denial kind of thing. So like or like we know in ourselves, you like everyone's conscious of the things that are flawed and deficient about them. But when confronted with other people's flaws and deficiencies, they are less accepting of them, or more prone to disgust or ridicule, or even though they themselves have them. So there's not that humility. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah.
Maybe humility is the wrong word.
I think it's made more clear by this third point. I'm going to leave out this other one.
Okay.
Because I think it's going to complicate things.
Fair enough.
But this is
trying to figure out what you didn't say a year and a half ago.
I have an idea of what I was saying, and just briefly, in case you're interested, what I meant was we don't there's a tendency of people who are like held up as not having flaws or conquering their flaws or being better. We almost like disdain them or don't want to believe them or don't want to believe it.
Because they shame us.
No, not because they shame us, but because we are insecure about our own flaws or don't want to accept our own flaws. So in order to make us feel better, we try to impose flaws on other people, even people who are quote unquote perfect or have no flaws.
Perfect.
Well, agreed, but that's why
didn't finish the sentence.
Well, no, because that's why I said this is evident by Jesus, because you know, you could argue,
right, but Jesus is like an ideal, right? It's not like it's a thing at which to aim, you know, like the perfect man, not like
no, but the idea is that all I was thinking there was that people criticized in the Bible, right? You know, which is, make of that what you will. I think we should have a conversation about faith and religion.
I think we should too.
Later on, but
not today.
Not today. But all I was getting at was people, you know, were trying to impose flaws on him, and even when, you know, quote unquote, according to the story, he's you know, perfect and the ideal human, right? We still disdain him for that. We still hate, you know, you take somebody like...
Right, because he's the crab you can't get hold of. Like, you can't pull him down kind of thing, so you try
Exactly.
to.
You try to. We want to pull people down to our, you know...
Rather than raise ourselves up.
Rather, we don't want people to go above, because then we feel bad that we're not above.
Yeah, that's what I meant by shame.
Right. So that was, I think that was all I meant
fair enough.
by that comment. Anyway, so going along, the third is kind of connected to two, obviously, but rather it is other people not coming to terms with their own flaws that keeps the system of disparity and judgment. So this is kind of related to the second point, right? And the idea is because everyone is plagued with their own flaws, and like you said, nobody is kind of able to reach out and get out. We want to continue to like pull people down and stop people from, you know, getting rid of their own flaws.
Right, because it's easier than addressing your own.
Easier than addressing our own.
Okay.
And it's much easier to feel better by criticizing and pointing fingers and despairing on other people's flaws and making yourself feel better that way than by putting in effort and work to...
I would agree with that.
Fix your own flaws.
Don't have a problem with that.
Okay, so moving on. So here's another point related to the answers to this. But if you let your guard down and open yourself up to the world, it will be easier to move past. Acceptance is an essential component of moving on.
So that's like just accepting your flaws and stop trying to resist the fact that you have them.
Right.
And just recognizing them and then coming up with a plan of how to deal with them.
Exactly.
Because once you recognize them, then it kind of sets up the next stage of dealing with them. Which is like, what is it? Like admitting you have a problem is the first step of...
Exactly.
Whatever the rest of that step
And
is.
I think it's interesting to tie this back into something like drowning or social anxiety, right? Because in case of drowning, again, I'm not certain about this, but my guess is that a lot of people don't connect the I don't know about this. Tell me what you think about this, because it's just an idea that and I don't know if it's correct myself, but the statement is most people, they don't connect, I have this deficiency in the sense that I'm not good at this, meaning I could improve. They don't do that. It's this inherent problem, or not problem, but it's a deficiency in me that is not something that I can move upon and improve. It's inherent. It's real. It's concrete. It's not going away.
So, like a secondary fear, almost, of trying to resolve it and watching yourself fail to.
Well, that's what I was talking about in the beginning. That's why I distinguish between the two fears.
Okay.
Right? I said the first one is never having tried to do it or taking risks that can lead to succeeding, and the second is failure that comes from coming up short even after having tried all the steps you can take to succeed.
Okay.
Right? And that's the second part, is the one that I think is what people really are terrified of.
Probably what stops people from trying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I meant when I was saying that fear of having tried all the steps to get to where you want to go. Or sorry, I don't know why I said that. Having tried all the steps to fix that fear, right? Or to fix that deficiency and coming up short. That fear of coming up short, even after having tried, is what stops people from.
Well, so I think what stops them is before that, right? So I think that's can certainly be the case.
Before what?
Before getting to the point where you've exhausted all.
No, but what I said, maybe this wasn't clear, but what I mean is, you don't try because you're afraid of trying and failing.
Yes, yeah, but okay, fair enough.
So you don't actually try all the steps. Instead, you just internalize it. I have this problem that's, inherent in me, and you take every steps to avoid situations
fair enough,
where it comes into play.
Right. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that's why I said acceptance is an essential component of moving on. Right? I'm not a good swimmer. And, in order to conquer my fear of drowning, I need to improve my swimming. And I need to put myself in a vulnerable situation. So I said, let down your guard, where I'm being,
Because otherwise you've got like false bravado. You're kind of like giving yourself a mask you're wearing to say, "Oh, I don't have this problem," or it's like a denial.
Right. It's because the part I'm getting at is a lot of our fears. Like, I have to be careful when I say this, because obviously some fears are rational, but a lot of fears that we have come from within, and but it's almost easier to have that fear of drowning than to go through all the steps of saying, well, I'm a bad swimmer. How can I, and it's hard for me.
Yeah, no, I see
how can
that.
I go forward into...
It's easier just to accept it as an existential...
We're being logged out.
No, it's good.
Wait. Press play. Good pumpkin.
Good pumpkin.
Okay. So then, if we can agree that acceptance is essential...
Sure.
Right?
Of the deficiency.
Yep. How to accept. So, one is to understand where you have that fear. Not just where it stems from, but why the realization of that fear is hard. So this is kind of what we're getting at when we're saying the realization that you're just, not a good swimmer and lack, and have some deficiencies, or, you find things, you're a little bit socially awkward and, you need to take steps to improve that, or, you get a little bit nervous on heights, and, you tend to freak out and overreact, stuff like that.
Sure.
So one possible answer to this, or why that realization of fear is hard, and why you have that fear, is... I'm going to skip makes life hard, because I don't know what I meant there. But many people don't know how to live with the result. They can't fathom that result, so they let it... The result being the failing, the trying and failing.
Sure.
So they can't fathom that result, so they let it plague them and internalize it as a deficiency, and therefore steer it away steer away from any situation where they might come into contact with that deficiency or fear. In other words, the result of trying, believing, hoping, and failing is too great, so they skip the first three parts and embrace the failing because it is easier and more comfortable than the former.
Sure. Kind of summarizing what we were saying.
Right.
Earlier. Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep. It's good to me.
Good. So, what the worst of the flaws brings you? I wrote that, but I don't think I mean the. What is the situation? And this is also like accepting, right? So thinking about what's the worst, that the flaws bring you. What is the situation that makes you the most afraid, or what is the worst thing that such a flaw could bring, and what would be the end result? So that's a process of thinking about, okay, well, I have this deficiency. What is the worst possible thing that this deficiency could bring, and what would be the end result?
So that's like the in any of those situations, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Right.
So like drowning again, or saying something, making an awkward joke at a party, or
Right.
freaking out on top of a cliff face.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, so this is number 3. Realization that there's a difference between proceeding as if there is an absence of a perceived deficiency and proceeding while embracing the perceived deficiency. So this is the distinction I'm trying to get at is something we mentioned earlier, but it's the idea of proceeding as if the deficiency does not exist, or it's just inherent, right? It's an inherent part of you that is unfixable. Or proceeding while embracing the perceived deficiency.
Yep.
So I am a bad swimmer. I'm open about that. I recognize it. I, have trouble with social situations at parties. I'm open about that. I'm going to go to, various swim classes, very beginner swim classes. I'm going to put myself in vulnerable situations. Versus I suck at swimming.
So I'm not.
Therefore, I'm never going to go near the water.
Yep. Okay.
Right? Or I'm socially awkward. I'm never going to go to a social situation.
Yep.
I'm afraid of heights. I'm never going to go to any building, above 3 floors. I'm afraid of snakes. I'm never
Gonna go outside.
go. And the issue there is, well, what if you do get put in that situation?
Right.
Then you're actually fucked. Right?
Right.
And that's kind of another thing I think.
That's a future you problem rather than a
Well, but do you know,
today you problem.
there's a lot of stories about this, and it's very interesting. It's something that I think about is, do you know, for example, do you know who not Natalie Portman, Natalie, what's her last name? Natalie something. She was in Rebel Without a Cause.
No idea. That's all right. Like,
You know what? We're gonna look this up. Actually, I guess we could technically do it up here.
could do that.
Yeah. Look up the movie Rebel Without a Cause. It's a movie that I think we should watch.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, just go to the IMDb page. James Dean movie. Natalie Wood. Yeah.
Okay.
So now type in Natalie Wood, and just do like Wikipedia. Right. Okay. So that's Natalie Wood. Very good looking actress. Born in San Francisco to Russian immigrant parents. That's besides the point. There's a lot of controversy about her death. The controversy is not really what's important. The part that I'm interested in is her biggest fear since she was a kid was Drowning.
Okay. Did she drown?
She drowned.
Okay.
Right. Now that to me is incredibly interesting. Not because, you know...
Right, well, so, because presumably she didn't take steps to learn to swim, so when she found herself in contact with water, she drowned because she couldn't swim.
Exactly. Okay. And that's the idea that when we like, that's kind of what I was talking about later, was it can happen a lot of times. Obviously, drowning is a very extreme example of a fear.
Sure.
But by not...
Or a costly situation.
Right. By, like, not addressing these fears and by being afraid of taking steps and then failing to improve this thing and then thereby avoiding it, we actually kind of will our, like, own fears to come true some of the time.
Right, I think I can see that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because you don't help yourself.
Right.
Right, like, so, like, but it's kind of, you're sacrificing.
But in some dark way, I think part of it is you want to be right. That you don't have, that it's not like...
Well, sure, because then you don't have to hold yourself accountable to doing something, because then
Right.
you're correct to not do something. So I guess you make it easier for yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, fair enough.
All right. Where were we? Right. So realization is a difference between proceeding as if there is an absence of perceived deficiency and proceeding while embracing the perceived deficiency. So that I think we covered, right? Sure. So then deficiency needs to be embraced by oneself, and only then can others accept it. Admit that others not accepting it can impact you embracing it.
That others not accepting.
I don't totally know.
Impact you embracing. I see. I don't know what you mean by others accepting. So when you say admit that others not accepting what? That you have a fear of something, or that you're trying to...
that you have a
deficiency.
That you're like really bad at swimming, that you're not great at social, situations.
Right. But I'm confused about why that impacts... Well, okay, so because when you recognize you have a deficiency, everyone else has to see it as well, including you. And so maybe you don't... It's hard enough to get you to see your own deficiency. It's hard as well, on top of that other people see it also. And if you don't want other people to see it, it would encourage you not to embrace it and not to recognize it, kind of like going along the same expedient path of not wanting to deal with it because it's easier, rather than dealing with it and all the difficulties that would come with it, be that recognizing it in yourself, having others see your deficiency, and all the other things that come along with it as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
I'm gonna figure out if I want to read this. Okay, so yeah. One solution is to have a strong enough belief in God that He accepts you, right? So the idea is, well, it doesn't matter that other people don't accept this flaw that I have, right? The idea is, if you're pious enough, you believe,
Right, but
God accepting you.
Surely that resolves the last point. But
yeah, that is.
Okay.
As
a solution. Okay,
yes, as a solution. That's difficult to do, and not everybody has that. And the point was, of just because I'll put this up quickly, I'll say very difficult to do, and even for Jesus, I think what I was getting there is kind of before Jesus dies, he does have like the moment of like panic, right? Where he's like, why
have you forsaken me?
Why,
God,
right? Why do you want me to die? What's the point? Like, what's all this, for? And,
Okay, yeah, so it's like a high bar. Like,
It's a very, very difficult.
yep, fair enough.
So the other solution is to try and change it, but avoiding can be misconstrued as changing. They are different.
Okay.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah, it was like,
Avoiding it is not changing the situation. Just not, going to.
yeah, you're just removing yourself
Right.
of the difficulty.
Right.
Right.
I think I made that point slightly early.
Yeah, that's right.
So acceptance that failure is a positive in quantified doses. So failure and acceptance of failure is progress, and without it, there is no progress.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So the idea is, the reason I said quantified doses is because, if you don't know how to swim, you're not gonna go and jump in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, right?
I wouldn't do that if I could swim, but
Neither would I.
I can.
You can't swim.
Sort of. Yeah. I haven't in a while, but
Okay.
I used to be a lifeguard.
Oh, me too.
I did a lot of swimming.
Yeah, me too.
Like 12 years ago.
You should go to St. Leonard's with me.
Sure.
Yeah. Show off your strokes. Anyway.
I do depths rather than lengths. That was a drowning joke.
I got it. Terrible joke.
Yeah.
All right, so it is. This table is wobbly. It is right. But like failing in the sense where like, you go in a 2-foot pool,
Baby steps.
baby steps, right? Failing in baby steps is productive.
Yeah.
And so,
But failing foolishly doesn't help because you die.
exactly.
Right.
Maybe you don't go, if you're awkward, maybe you don't just go and like, oh, I can give a speech to, the UN and go on a live TV broadcast, but maybe you see 1 or 2 friends and, you like take baby steps, right?
Sure.
And then if you fail, well, then you learn from it and you can move on.
Yep. Sort of agreed.
And then so this other point is trusting that the deficiency can be separated from fear and that it's only phantom real. Trusting meaning the deficiency. The reason I said phantom real is because I wanted to say that the deficiency is not, real in the sense that it's always there, right? It can be changed.
Mm-hmm.
A deficiency to me is not something that is inherent in something. A deficiency can be fixed or changed or improved.
Sure. It depends on the deficiency, but yeah.
Right. Well,
So,
what are you talking about when you say in some instances?
well, I mean, it depends what deficiency you have.
Like, what would be a deficiency that you couldn't?
Like, I'm not saying that there isn't, like, there's cases where there's nothing that you could do, right? Like, like losing, like having an absence of limbs or, I don't know, or a stammer or, I don't know, these things don't, it's not, I'm not saying, oh, therefore the jig is up kind of thing. I guess I was thinking, actually, take back what I said.
Okay. Good. So then this, yeah. Can you notice this point?
Yep.
Trusting that you can change course and believing in it. Believing you can use fate to do so and trusting that hope will always be there. Does that make sense?
Believing you can use fate to do so and trusting that hope will always be there. Believing you can use fate to do so.
Trusting that hope will always be there makes sense, right? Meaning hope. Okay, but leaving aside the point, believing that you can use fate to do so.
Okay.
The part trusting that hope will always be there, meaning the hope that you can always improve will always be there.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
And the idea when I said believing you can use fate to do so, I think what I was referring to is
because to me, like,
time.
well, no, I guess like the idea of fate like detracts the agency from it a little bit. Like if you just leave it up to fate, right, or using fate, right, to contend with your deficiencies, right, that's kind of counter to the idea of
I think that was poorly worded, and I think what I meant is, in this instance, again, like I said, this was written very quickly.
Of course, and a year and a half ago. a year ago.
Year ago. Where my mind's set was very different for reasons we could get into later. But believing you can use faith to do so. I think what I just meant is by trying to improve, you like, and putting an effort, fate will help push you towards that, way of improving.
Okay, sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not sitting back doing nothing, but it's if I put steps to improve.
Right, so that's like the kind of causal relationship
Exactly.
between doing something and the likely effects of you having done that.
Exactly.
Okay, fair enough.
So then this next point.
Sure.
How to preserve acceptance and deal with it after failure.
So you don't get put off from continuing to try once you've tried and failed a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should there be a separation between fears or deficiencies that we should not try to change or ones that we should? I.e., can we categorize all deficiencies equally? How to continue or how to live once you let go / what to do. So these two things are kind of open-ended. I want to ask you, so just get your opinion about this fifth point. Should there be a separation between fears or deficiencies that we should not try to change or ones that we should? I.e., can we categorize all deficiencies equally? I meant that as a question when I wrote it because I don't know the answer.
I don't know. I think this was kind of the thing I was trying to push back on a couple of minutes ago.
Right. And probably what was happening was when I was writing it, I was like, wait, maybe something I said doesn't make complete sense. Or maybe I have questions, and so I wrote this question to...
Fears are deficiencies that we should not try to change, or ones that we should. Well, I mean, look, I guess you don't want to be like foolhardy with any of these, right? You don't want to, like speaking like in terms of Aristotelian virtue ethics, right? Like you want to get that right spot between courageous and foolhardiness. You don't want to just sprint at a lion, right?
Right.
Because you're just gonna die, right? So, you don't want to deprive yourself of that fear, right? Because that's gonna keep you alive, right? You kind of want to, you don't want to remedy all of them because you'll just go and do stupid things that'll just bring about your death. But you were fearless while you were doing it, and you weren't afraid. So I guess there's a distinction to be drawn there. And I guess the other thing that popped into my head was things like chemical addiction, for example, right? Like that, like. Although I guess there is always, even though it is a very different kind of addiction, there's always, you can still recognize it and you can still go and ask for help, even though the likelihood of you doing it on your own is basically zero because of the depth of the issue, chemically speaking.
It seems like to me that there's...
it
seems like to me that there's a difference between physical deficiencies and more abstract or maybe temperamental deficiencies.
Like in personality.
So what I would categorize as like physical deficiencies would be like what you said, I can't outrun a lion.
Okay.
You know, or I can't fly, or I if you're a man, you can't have babies. Maybe that's a controversial thing in 30 years. I don't know.
You keep the fetuses in a box if you want.
Let's put that comment aside.
Some people will get that joke.
Or things like I, can't, whatever. Jump out of an airplane without a parachute and survive.
Okay, sure.
Right, those are physical deficiencies.
Okay.
And then, like, more what I would call abstract deficiencies or attributable deficiencies are like stuff like
being too nice for your own good kind of thing,
or stuff like, you know, not great in social situations, or, you know, can't swim, or
right. So it's a distinction between things you do have control over and things you don't have control
yes,
over. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I think there's a reasonable and fair
Right.
distinction to be drawn between those,
And then so
and fairly intuitive also.
there's two. I'm gonna read these last two parts because I think they're both open-ended questions. But how to continue or how to live once you let go / what to do. And then this was a question that I don't think we'll get to answer concretely. But anyway, and then it seems like our fears and desires are very connected in a way because the things that we desire the most are the ones we most fear not having.
It seems like our fears and desires are very connected in a way, because the things that we desire the most are the ones we most fear not having. That seems to make sense to me. So I guess that kind of brings us back to the.
I think. Sorry, I think
You okay?
I was starting to think about going in a different direction
Okay.
when I wrote this last line. Just wanted to
Fears
say
and
that.
desires are connected. The things we desire the most, the ones we most fear not having. How would you put that in terms of? I know you said you think about going in a different direction, but using the examples we've been using,
Drowning, social anxiety.
right? So like, how would those examples tie into that?
Well, let's use social anxiety.
Yeah. Good.
We desire to not to be
In company.
in company normal, not have that social anxiety,
Right.
not, you know,
Hence booze. That was my trick anyway. I don't know.
you know, but fit in, right?
Yeah.
And so we desire that.
And so you fear not having it, and so
We most fear not having it.
right, but then
It seems like also our fears and our deficiencies play into our desires. In a way,
yeah, I think some of the examples, yeah.
right? Because in the case of
We take the drowny, heighty ones away.
right, well, maybe even like
Well, I know I'd like to go hiking, kind of thing. I'd with my desire to go up to Ben Nevis or go.
or just to not
hiking,
fear
right?
that, like, you know, to desire not to feel that, like, you know, terrid, you know,
Okay.
you know, petrified state when I go up into heights. Right?
Yeah, I think so.
Does that kind of make sense? The relationship that desire and fear have?
I think so.
Like I said, I think maybe that could be.
But I guess I'm struggling to see how, because what we were talking about was how it stops you from doing that which would bring about the solution to your to your desires, right? So that you get the thing that you desire, which would be social company, which would be comfort around water, comfort around heights, comfort around lions.
Right.
So, but it would seem that if that was the case, then it wouldn't. It would more likely drive you towards seeking a solution than seeking the short-term expedient path of not dealing with it, even though it's like, or is that how you're then tormented in that like spot of not dealing with it? You're tormented by the fact that you know you want something, you know you desire something, and you're watching yourself still not do the thing you need to resolve the problem.
Exactly, and it compounds the fear of trying and failing even more because the devastation of trying, you know.
Well, both are pretty horrible. I think both. It's like it's
both when you say both.
Well, as in like trying and failing, and watching like the fear of watching yourself do that, but then also watching yourself fail to try. Right, because you're. Go on.
I agree, but I think most people don't think of it as not failing to. I think, but I don't think people see it as not failing to try. I think I guess I think it's more like it's this inherent thing in me that, you know, like.
Well, no, I know, but that's a deceit, right?
Right, it's a deceit.
No, it's not. So like
exactly.
So I think people make those kind of.
It's tricks. Not true, but they think it.
Well, yeah, no, a part of them thinks it, right? So like I don't think you can ultimately we can do a really good job of keeping things from ourselves, right?
Right.
Like so, like I think you can for years convince yourself, or you can be in this kind of dual state of both knowing and not knowing a flaw of yours, right? You could it's denial, right? Like alcoholics and people who have trouble, right? It's like you know. Right, you're not an idiot. You know exactly that you have this problem, but you're just in denial about it, right? And it's like you're in this kind of dual state of both knowing and not knowing, because you're just doing in this little. You've got this weird web of like justifications and rationalizations for your behavior. Like, oh, I just need to do this because it gets me this, or I need to do this because it's easier for me to get out of bed and go to work and all the rest of it, or it's easier for me to do this. And so you've got all this web of like reasons why you have this failing. And then that's kind of your justification. But then there's the part of you that when you go to bed at night and you're laying there, you're like, wow, I'm a prick, right? And like, oh, I'm so weak. Or like, you know, when you're in those moments on your own and there's no one else, it's just you. Like, you know when you're failing and you know that you failed, even though you've got this web of justifications and you can try and escape that.
You failed in the sense that you know that you failed.
To even try, right? Yeah.
To not try. Or you failed to try. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Too many double negatives.
I know. It tripped me up. But yeah.
I've enjoyed this.
I mean, I think, I think the point with desire is, right, like we said, it compounds the both not, the fear of trying and failing, and then also the miserability, if that's a word, miserableness of not trying or failing to try. And then, so what about this last part right above this? How to continue or how to live once you let go. What to do?
Well, I feel like that's pretty easy because it's once... maybe easy is the wrong word. But like once you've recognized that you have a problem and that you need to do something about it, easy was the wrong word. It's I guess it's like you're now in a state of constant vigilance, right? You're in that space of recognizing that you need to move in this direction and not that direction,
right?
But it's always easier to go in that direction, exactly. So the temptation to relapse or defer to the default position of comfort is always going to be there, a nagging temptation of, oh, just sit down, man, don't worry about it, just relax, you don't have to stress yourself, you don't have to go and exercise, you don't have to go and do these hard things. It should be easy for you to just not do them, right? Which was the voice that was there in the first place. So I guess it's you just in this state of, and I have this quite frequently. I have a really hard time. I've had a really hard time over the last 2 or 3 years exercising. I wasn't a PT for very long, but I was sort of frequently exercising for about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And then the last 4 or 5 has been stop start. Like I'll do 3 or 6 months of fairly active work, and then 6 months of not, and I'm always and it's not like I don't know all of the reasons why I should, like I'm aware of the reasons why I should be exercising, why I should be eating better, right? I know how to do it. I know the technicalities, right? I'm all, like it's not like I've lost all of these things. Which it makes it worse, right?
Exactly. Like when you know how to do it and what to do,
and I'm still watching myself not do it anyway. Yeah. It's unpleasant.
Yeah. But then,
But that's my point, right? You have to, like, it's that, I don't know, it's like you constantly trying to coax yourself off the couch, essentially. It's like try and get some momentum going, or keep yourself.
it's kind of like finding, I mean, but there's a balance to it, right? Because
Sure.
you can't spend 24 hours for 7 days a week exercising, thinking you have to do it.
No, I know.
So, right, like part of it, or like, you are a student, you're very passionate about other subjects, you got a lot going on, right? So I do think there's the point where you have to like accept that there will be some, because correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've heard, from what you've told me, is you used to be in phenomenal shape,
Pretty good shape.
pretty fucking good shape,
Yeah.
and
It's pretty good, Nick.
you one of the things that's hard for you.
I had some deficiencies, bear in mind. Obviously.
Okay,
Sorry.
but one of the things that's hard for you is feeling like you want to get back to, like, anytime you go and work out, part of you feels like I used to be able to do this. I used to be in this scenario.
Not so much. Like,
No.
well, no. I used to.
Okay.
I used to feel that, but
Well, then that's good, because part of it is you're accepting that there's maybe some deficiencies.
yeah, I just feel like it's. I won't get into it now, but like, there's a lot of complicated reasons I think why I'm struggling with this. But like I can't like I. It's one of the reasons why I shifted to things like I tried to take up things like jiu-jitsu, and why I've started Muay Thai recently. Because I was more concerned previously with like weightlifting,
Right.
which I wasn't amazing at in some areas. But yeah, like I kind of like I'm not that fast anymore that I can't lift huge amounts of weight.
Well, that's good.
But
But
no,
at one point you were, right?
yeah, no, I know, I still am in part, right? But what I've done is I've let myself get to a position where I'm so far away from where I was, even just kind of like a median level of fitness, right?
Right.
That it's like I'm starting from scratch in some senses. Like I went to the gym this morning and was using like 6, 8, 10 kilogram dumbbells for like shoulders and stuff,
Yeah.
which is like, but again, comparing what I used to lift, it's a massive difference. But it's not unreasonable because I haven't been exercising for
Right.
like I haven't done consistent. It's like last summer, my mum lives on a farm. We had loads of logs. I tried my hand at cabering, right? It's like
Cabering.
tossing logs.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
It's a,
never lived
it's a
on a
Scottish sport. No, it's just a Scottish thing. Hang on.
Look at how fancy we are.
I know, right? I'm like Jamie from Joe Rogan.
This is.
Am I spelling that right? Yes. Look at that. Go away, British Airways. Also, you VR headsets. Look at this guy.
You can skip the ad now. Alright, so this is cabering.
Yeah.
And you did it with logs that big.
No. There was like probably like about that big.
Okay.
And you were trying to like get this end of the log, the other side.
Oh.
Yeah. Cabering.
It's a very Scottish thing.
It's incredibly Scottish. So hey man, can you throw that log? But I can throw that log further than you can. Here he goes.
Alright.
Watch him trying to pick it up. Oh, they missed the pickup bit. The pickup bit's the hardest.
Oh, he's go!
Oh, he hasn't got it.
Alright, here we go. He's got it. And yep.
Yeah, see, you got it. Yeah, exactly.
This is too Scottish for me.
Unlucky. But right, let's not get distracted by
Yes.
the awesome Scots.
Back to the pumpkins.
Back to the pumpkins.
Happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween, everyone.
So yeah, I mean, I think we should
Wrap up.
but yeah, I mean, I think it's just kind of this like push pull, and you know, you have to accept some you know, you're not gonna be the Rock Johnson, right? But maybe he has more deficiencies in other parts, and so it's kind of like balancing where you want your deficiencies to be.
Well, I mean, he just consistently works out, so it's kind of like...
But I mean, maybe in his cognitive capacities, he's not as, you know, strong as you.
I doubt it, but...
But you don't know that.
True, no, I don't.
You know, if he wants to come on the podcast and debate you, you know, maybe we can find out. But no, I mean, I do think. I mean, it comes back to the Aristotelian finding the mean, right? In the sense that, like, you want to try to find points, you know, where you're not deficient in fitness, right? You're not deficiently. What?
Well, no, I guess the point you want to try and find yourself in is aware of that which... Because that... Like, there will be deficiencies.
Right.
Exactly. Like, it's not like you're not going to arrive at a place where you're in an absence of deficiencies.
Right.
But it's like the being humble enough to recognize as and when you do, and which ones to pay attention to,
right,
and what to do to in regards to the ones that you're paying attention to.
Right. And that you can improve them.
Yeah. Well, that seems like a reasonable...
That seems like a reasonable way. I mean, we can...
Should we call it there?
I think we could call it there, and, you know, we can talk. I think... This is one part of fear, right?
Yeah, hang on.
What?
Let's wrap up.
Oh, right. So this is one part of fear. I would love to have more conversations about different kinds of fear, and particularly fear of death is something that interests me a lot. I don't know if you'd be interested in having a conversation on that.
Yeah, anything, man.
But yeah, so this was good fun. Episode 11 to 13 or 10 to 12, I don't know. And again, Spotify. We'll try to put it up on YouTube. What? Pumpkins. Happy Halloween, and
have a good one, everyone. Take care of yourselves.
Sign up.